Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a cool one for you. I wanted to share my thoughts on the new crippled black phoenix. It's called The Wolf Changes Its Fur but Not Its Nature. I don't really know what you would call this particular genre of music. It's definitely in the doom rock sort of spectrum, but it does have a lot of pieces to it that are a little bit harder to nail down to those specific sort of overarching themes. You do have a lot of stuff that sort of breaks that mold. You have a little bit of ambient, you have a little bit of sort of the Agalloch kind of thing. And both of those things are sort of themes throughout the record. We'll start with the track rundown. First up, we've got We Forgotten Who We Are. I'm not sure if this is a typo thing through Spotify, but it does appear to be how they're naming it. So it is We Forgotten Who We Are. So it starts with some interesting, like, what I would call like goth panic chords. They're just these like light, clean guitar sort of things that are sort of strummed almost like you would panic chords. The backing piano part that goes with it sounds really good. It's very sorrowful, it builds up like beautifully. Transitions to the verse section very nicely. The bass line is cool. It's almost like synthy with how it's sort of like overdriven. I found the vocal sections on this song to be a little bit of a miss. It's a bit wordy, and because they have both singers singing at the same time, there's like a woman singer and then also a male one. I found just sort of the syncopation of the vocals a little bit weird. Also the fact that it breaks at the 6-minute mark and there's no more vocals for the rest of the song. And the track is 11 minutes long. So you do have a long, like 5-minute section of instrumentation. However, I thought the instrumentation of the rest of the song was really good. There was a piano break at around the 7-minute mark that maybe could have been a bit more interesting, but it did develop really well. Breaks into this really cool, heavy atmosphere section with really heavy, like tom drums that are almost like super loud in your face. Sounds really good. The guitar solo was awesome. I thought the tone of it all sounded really great. Very emotional and well written. And then it just sort of stops. It stops right in the middle of the guitar solo, this sort of instrumentation section. When I first heard it, I was like, this has to be a mistake. It's, still possible, I suppose, that it could be. I wasn't able to check on Bandcamp, unfortunately, because that album on Bandcamp doesn't release until the 29th. So this is just sort of a auditory preview. But yeah, those two negatives sort of bring down the song quite a bit for me, even though I quite liked how the whole thing sounded. Just some weird choices here and there on this one. And it sort of set me up for the rest of the album as being, I wasn't too sure if I was going to like it or anything like that. The rest of the album, I will say, does improve for me. The next one's called You Put the Devil in Me. This one's a really cool one. It's an immediate break from that emotional guitar solo, and it goes right into an accordion, which almost sounds dumb. It's like too dumb to be real. But the guitar tone after that is really good. The main melody sounds great. It's very sort of bluesy, rocky. Gives me a bit of a Solstice kind of feel as like a reference. The vocals sound great. The woman sings mostly on this one, but she sounds fantastic. Her name is, better look it up actually, Belinda Cordic. So Belinda sounds great. On this one, I think her voice works really well with sort of these up-tempo kind of feel. The sound is huge. They do this really cool feel change at about the 4.5-minute mark, and I thought that sounded really cool. Develops really well into like a slide guitar solo, and I just think the whole song just sounds really great, and it develops really well. So I really liked this one. Next one is 444. The intro sounds like it's clipped from a movie or something. I don't really recognize it. This one has a little bit of like a Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, or like Romanian sort of vibe. Almost sounds like James Bond in the desert to me. Like it would have that sound going on right when he's, I don't know, stranded. Has a very washed out and sort of echoey chorus. It sort of keeps that cinematic feel that I was sort of referring to with the James Bond thing. Almost has like that stomp clap sort of thing at the end, but it does work in this context. Does feel more like an album song rather than a single. It's very sort of atmospheric. So the next one is Goodnight Europe Part 2. Very vibey intro, sounds really good. I really liked the sound of the sort of faded background drums. Had a lot of depth to it, which I thought was cool. This one's another more atmospheric track. Does do some things similar as like other sections previous on this album, so it does sort of sound a bit familiar compared to some of the other tracks to themselves. But it builds up really cool. It's very like Agalloch in the guitars. It has that like ringing reverb sound, and it's layered really well in sort of that way. I thought the big drums that sort of come in at the 4.5 minute mark sound really powerful and really cool. It does drop into a more low-key sort of vocal section. I still love that the drums are really loud here. I think the contrast between that and the instrumentation sounds really great. And the ending is very powerful. It has this thunderstorm happening with these big chord guitars. It sounds really cool. The next one I can only refer to as negative. I'm not quite sure. It's like brackets with sort of a dash in the middle. This one's more of an interlude track. It's ambient, but the sound is quite lush and full. It develops really well, so I'll leave it with that. But it does flow into the next one really well, and the next one's called Song for the Unloved. I thought it was funny that it flowed really well from an ambient track into sort of this folky country intro, but it does work really well. We're starting off with more of those duo vocals, and I do sort of wish that they had chosen one or the other. The heavy drums here sound sick as fuck. It's almost like 80s ballad-ish. To me, it gives almost a Guns N' Roses Civil War kind of thing, but with that sort of ringing Agalloch chord kind of style to it, and I thought that together sounds really cool. Also very atmospheric. And then it leads off and it transitions into a line that almost sounds like Eye of the Tiger, that sort of dun digga dun digga dun bow 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 bow, like that backing bass line. It does sort of sound like that to me. And it builds up really well, and the background guitars are layered really cool. It's very atmospheric as well. And then somehow we get into Gregorian chants. Into a straight up rock section, which is insane. But it does work really well within the context of the song, and it's something that's so strange to me. It's super insane. And from that, we go into a saxophone solo, into a good prog rock, like syncopated thing. It's just really ambitious. And then we get vocals again for the first time in 9 minutes. So we have vocals up until I think about the 3.5 minute mark, and we don't get vocals again until around the 12-minute mark. So it's just this huge developing instrumental section, and honestly I don't miss the vocals during that time, so that's really cool. But it does bring back, it sort of brings it around full circle, and the ending is sort of similar to how it was in the beginning, which is cool. It's just nice that it develops into this this whole listen, right? That one leads into Wissendine. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Wissendine. This was also another like cool ballady one. I think the vocals sort of drive the verses. The chorus is nice and full. It does have a nice moody switch at sort of the 2-minute 45-second mark, and I think that breaks it up really well because it does tend to kind of be its own thing. It doesn't have the same sort of prog expansive thing that some of the other tracks have, but it's nice in and of itself. I will say too, the flow from Wissendine into Blizzard of Horned Cats sounds really great. That's the next track. Piano that sort of fades into these heavy guitars, which sounds really cool. Again, great Agalloch feel on these melody guitars, but it does also sort of end abruptly in a similar fashion with the sound of like tape melting away, which is a cool effect, but it's also just sort of a short instrumental kind of thing, but it's all good. So yeah, I am still sick, but I did really like this record, so I did want to share it with you guys. What did I think of it overall? Overall, I think it's a really cool record. It's really ambitious and really creatively unique. Overall, I think it's a great mix of songs. The mix of genres sounds super cool. It's cohesive, but it's very varied. The track lengths and even the style of it also varied. It sort of has this like dark, haunting, sorrowful feel, but it develops well when it does go into these other sort of upbeat sections or these more cinematic feels. I think the mix was fantastic. I thought it was creatively adventurous and imaginative. I loved how the drums were adapted to like each situation. They could be like really loud and powerful or like more laid back depending on the mood of the track. And just the decision making, I think, behind the drums sounded excellent. The guitars were creative and ambitious. The tone of it all was great. The sound was big and full. The vocals sounded great. I thought Belinda's voice in particular sounded really great. In particular, I think her voice sounded great on You Put the Devil in Me, so I just liked her voice. Lots of the vibes were like very Agalloch heavy, but it didn't sound like a copycat. I really loved all the weird twists and turns, and I thought they sounded really appropriate in the songs. It's like, how could you go from like a folk country song to Gregorian chants in sort of the same track? It's just crazy. Overall, I wasn't super big on the sound of the duo singing, so when Belinda would sing with Joel, I just thought they sounded a little bit better separately. I did find myself wishing there was another song like You Put the Devil in Me on the record. Just another one of those up-tempo kind of rock focus songs. Just to break up a little bit of the bleakness of the rest of the record. I thought the vocals sounded great, but it could be a bit sparse. And as much as I loved the long instrumental build-up sections, and they sounded really good, I just feel like they could have used a little bit more vocals on the album as a whole. But the only big issue I had with the record was the first track, and just how it ended and how the flow of the vocals were. Which is sort of unfortunate because I did like the instrumentation on that song. And even, you know, listening back, the vocal style kind of fits the song. It just isn't the greatest thing in the world for me. It's more just how the track ended and just sort of that abruptness of ending it like that. I am hoping it's more of a mistake than a creative choice, but it is also unfortunate that it was the first track that I listened to where that thing happened. So but yeah, this was a cool album. I really like this mix of sort of the Guns N' Roses guitar feel and like the Agalloch melodies and just the general production quality, and there's just a lot to love about this record. I went through it very intrigued with how it was developing as I was listening. It's just that the things that I didn't like as much, I think, stuck out quite a bit just because I really loved how the rest of the record sounded. So I felt like the downside sort of felt like more of a bummer to me than they maybe were, just because the rest of the record is so good. It's like when a mistake happens, it just drops it much more drastically just because you don't want to see the flaws in it. So as far as a number score, I am going to give it a solid 8 out of 10, which is kind of disappointing for me just because I feel like it could have been a 9 or a 10, but just certain things, especially on that first track, I just think really set up the rest of the listen as less than it could be. But I really think this is a creatively ambitious and inspiring project. Really close to being like a 9 or a 10. Like, it's insane. But yeah, overall, I think it was a really cool record. I really loved listening to it. I really think you guys should listen to it as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much. That was Crippled Black Phoenix. Check you later. Deuce.